Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our Zoom live today on food sensitivities, food allergies, and how it contributes to muscle inflammation. My name is Brianna, and I'm with Viktor. I will be your moderator today. Viktor provides an array of services such as brand management, website design and development, business transformation, social media, and live event support. Throughout this live, there will be a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions, please ask them there, and we will address them at the end of the session. I'm happy to introduce our speakers today, Owens of Delos Therapy and Terri McCreedy of Complete Clinics. Eric is the co-founder of Delos Therapy and is a decorated table tennis athlete who has competed in 6 world championships, 3 Pan American Games, and, fun fact, he was inducted into the US Table Tennis Hall of Fame in 2015. Alongside Delos Therapy, he is also the co-founder of Delos Robotics and Delos Institute. So as many of you know, Delos Therapy is a precise, innovative therapy for chronic pain, muscle stiffness, and athletic injury, where pressure is applied to the entire length of the muscle to restructure the collagen buildup within the fascia. This helps restore pliability so you can move easily without pain. We also have with us today Terri McCreedy of Complete Clinics. Terri began her training with a degree in biochemistry. She then obtained a BS in nursing, and while working as an intensive care nurse, she also received her master's in nursing. Over the past 15 plus years as a nurse practitioner, she has enjoyed working in healthcare, guiding her patients on their path to wellness. Terri has also spent the last 12 years as a professor at a university training nurse practitioners. As mentioned before, Terri works at Complete Clinics, where board-certified physicians and nurse practitioners provide weight loss programs that work to find the ideal solution for each individual. Her goal is to correct the underlying problem associated with the weight problem. Thank you both for being here with us today.
Hello, happy to be here.
Having us.
All right, so without further ado, let's jump in. So to start, Terri, could you give us the difference between a food allergy and a food sensitivity, and maybe even what a food sensitivity feels like in comparison to a food allergy?
Absolutely. So again, our immune system is our gift that we have to fight off all kinds of things, viruses, bugs, allergens, and even foods. So when foods leak into our bloodstream, our immune system is going to react to that. So when we are thinking about the immune system, we're going to talk about immunoglobulins. And there are 4 of them, but we're just going to talk about IgE and IgG. So many of us have heard of the IgE reaction that we get. That's the most immediate reaction. That is the one in which we, you've heard of people who have peanut allergies, so thus they need like an EpiPen to stop the allergic reaction. It's immediate, and what it feels like is your throat closing up. It is a very serious reaction that happens in the body. So that's your IgE allergy. That's a true food allergy. And so IgG, which is a food sensitivity. Now what that means is it's a slower, insidious kind of reaction in which the immune system is turned on. So this image is beautiful because it shows the complexity of this. And so when foods, and this is a whole topic in and of itself, but when foods leak from your intestines into your bloodstream, your immune system, the IgG piece, makes antibodies to it. And so thus, it plugs in and it's going to cause a reaction. And so what does that one feel like? That one feels more like inflammation that can happen throughout the body, and it targets different areas of the body. It can target all kinds of things, but of course knees, even brain. And so this is the one that we need to be very concerned about with autoimmune diseases as well.
So Terri, a couple of questions about that, and I'm fascinated by the topic. And I have often sort of been a little bit confused with the difference between a sensitivity and an allergy. And so
Yes.
It sounds like that they're both immune mediated. I was under the assumption that the food allergy is for sure, that's an allergic reaction, right? That's the immune system basically attacking this foreign pathogen versus a sensitivity. You know, a good example to that might be dairy or having a lactose intolerance. So if you don't have the enzyme lactase, for example, to be able to process the protein or the sugar in milk, is that still immune mediated even though it's a sensitivity?
Well, those are two different processes. So in the IgE, both IgG and IgM are always floating in the blood. So they're always floating in the blood and they're ready to attack. So again, IgE is going to attack and cause the throat closing and the more serious reaction. But it has to do with the gut, the intestines. And so when the intestines, so for example, lactose intolerance, when you consume the dairy and it goes into the intestine, we don't have the enzyme to break it down. So that's where we get the gas and bloating and sometimes diarrhea. Versus IgG sensitivity, there's a process called leaky gut syndrome. Many people have heard of that, but that's when foods leak through the intestine lining into the bloodstream. And then here comes our beautiful immune system, the IgG, attacking that food, that molecule, and making the inflammatory response turn on, thus causing the inflammatory response to happen in the systemic body.
Got it. And how would we know if we're sensitive or allergic to a particular food?
Yes. So allergic is, oh boy, well, in the medical world, if we were going to just do a blood test for a food allergy, we're just looking for, many times there's just a panel that we do, and we're looking for the IgE molecules of that food. Now that one, remember, is the most serious. So that's the first one we would check for. And then the IgG is a blood test as well. And so again, but that one's just looking for the antibodies, the IgG antibodies to certain foods.
Got it.
So yeah, so they're both can be blood. Also, we know that there are other tests that we can do in the medical field that are like prick tests, if you've ever seen that, where the person is responding. That's an IgE reaction. So they're responding to the strawberries or whatever that they're testing for on their skin. So again, more immediate. That one happens very quickly.
Okay, all right. Sounds a lot more serious than a sensitivity as well.
Correct, except when you're looking at autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid or, you know, just more serious things like that. Even along the connective tissue realm, like lupus or whatever, you know, something like that.
Yeah, I've actually seen some decent research about the immune system attacking collagen type 2 in rheumatoid arthritis. And so there seems to be a lot of overlap. And we'll get into this a little bit later about the allergic reaction to food and sensitivities, but it also has crossover effects into the connective tissue and affects the muscle tissue and the fascia, and has a lot of pathological effects downstream of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, Eric, you kind of expand on that. So how does this food sensitivity that Terry's talking about work to inflame your muscle tissue?
Yeah, I mean, inflammation is something that, you know, nowadays it's a part of pretty much every chronic disease. You know, it's sort of like the theory of everything, the theory of disease. Inflammation seems to be the root cause of a lot of that. In my field, what my passion is really studying the myofascial system. And the research has become very clear that anything that causes inflammation, it could be a food sensitivity, an allergy, could be an increase in sugar intake. Basically what it does is the inflammatory process, it changes the way the collagen is organized in the muscle tissue. Collagen has a really, really specific orientation and alignment to allow forces to travel through the muscle. That's really what the fascia is doing inside of the muscle. A lot of people think fascia is this saran wrap that goes around the muscle, not realizing fascia is embedded inside of the muscle. It's also around organs, but if we just look at muscle tissue, it's not only around it, but it's inside of it. And it's how muscle actually conducts force through that entire muscle, through the tendon. But the collagen has to be aligned in a very specific way to allow that force to go through. And when the alignment is disrupted, the forces don't go through. So it can lead to the inability to contract the muscle properly. It can lead to weakness. It can lead to fatigue. And so there's some very interesting signals that take place in the process of inflammation that change the alignment of the collagen. And there's a ton of research looking at the inflammatory cytokines and the signals that are taking place, and they're taking muscle biopsies, and they're showing non-inflamed tissue has very, very specific alignment, and inflamed tissue, the alignment is more of a fibrotic. It's like a very mangled, very disorganized type of collagen. And the patients that have that, they also say that they're tired, they feel fatigued, their workouts aren't as good, the muscle doesn't grow as much because the force isn't traveling through the muscle properly. And there's a huge amount of overlap with anything that's inflammatory and how it's organizing our collagen in our body.
Interesting. All right, so
Absolutely. Yeah.
Terri, as Eric kind of mentioned before, I know personally I stay away from dairy because it makes me feel inflamed, more bogged down, tired. And I know I have a few friends that stay away from gluten and other things, but I'm wondering, what is the most common food sensitivity that you see in your practice?
Well, with the food sensitivity testing that I've done in over the past 15 years on many patients, again, it's a blood test, and then we send it to a very reputable lab. It's been around for about 30 years, actually, the lab that we use, and it's 184 foods. So when we're looking at that panel of 184 foods, and again, thousands of them, what's the number one allergen? It's dairy. It's dairy. So I'm going to say food sensitivity. So the number one food sensitivity, IgG, and I do like to use the terminology correctly, the food sensitivity is dairy. Dairy overwhelming. And of course, people are very sad and they begin grieving to see that because everyone loves their dairy. And so dairy is the number one allergen. Egg yolks are second. So we see a lot of food sensitivities to egg yolks, but if they're okay with egg whites, that's great. So that then they know it's very simple to separate those two out. And then I would say the third is gluten, a form of gluten or wheat or amaranth that is also part of the wheat molecule. And then we see things like pineapple, that people are like, oh, pineapple's so healthy. Well, not for you, my dear. Or even things like turmeric or turmeric, however you say it, which we take for our joint pain, correct? But if you have a food sensitivity to that spice, then that is going to actually do the opposite and cause more of an inflammatory response.
So why do
so interesting because, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bree.
Why are people like so addicted to dairy or gluten, say?
Well, that's another very interesting topic that I've been studying for a very long time. So you can tell, like Eric was talking about his passion. Mine is food sensitivity and inflammation. And Eric was exactly right. When I do my lectures, and I lecture on all disease processes with my students, and every single disease process from asthma all the way to hypothyroid to diabetes, they are all inflammatory diseases. And so, so we are really dealing with a very big issue here. And so when our body makes and breaks down the gluten and dairy molecule, by the way, they're very similar molecules. Gluten is one carbon, blah, 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 I won't bore you, blah, 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 chain longer. But when they break down, they leak into the bloodstream, right? And so it's called an opiate effect. So it goes to the brain and it attaches to our opiate receptors. By the way, we all have opiate receptors, and it makes us feel good. And so, isn't that interesting? And it attaches almost like concrete. And so why is pizza the number one addictive food in the world? Because it has wheat and dairy. And so it definitely attaches to the opiate receptors. And the truth is, Bree, to get off wheat and dairy, you will absolutely go through a withdrawal. And so your body actually craves it. It's sad. It really is sad to eliminate it. But we understand the physical ramifications of taking it out. So, yeah, it's an interesting topic for sure.
Yeah, I know I personally stay away from dairy almost exclusively. And I do get a question a lot, and I'd love to ask you, is, people say, well, where do you get your calcium, right? And so I've got my go-to answer with green leafy vegetables, but I would love to hear your insight where people are, they're consuming, milk does the body good. They're consuming dairy, eating yogurt and things like that for probiotics and calcium and things. But what are some other strategies people can use so that they don't have the inflammation caused by dairy, but they can still get probiotics and calcium and other micronutrients?
Absolutely. Great topic. And I work with women that are trying to get pregnant and so on, working on prenatal health. And so that's a very important topic. And like you just said, you get more calcium from broccoli. So eat your broccoli and avoid your dairy. And so if you're want your body to function more appropriately and absorb that calcium better, you definitely are going to want to do it through green leafies, your broccoli. Now, we know that orange juice, there's fortified orange juices and so on. Again, you got to make sure you're not sensitive to oranges. I personally am a 3-star to oranges. And so, there's other ways of getting calcium than dairy. Now, the probiotic question, really funny, because that one is I asked all the time. Take a probiotic. Take a probiotic and don't get the, first of all, calories. Remember, I'm in weight loss too. So the calories from dairy, how about just take the probiotic? But tricky, dairy-free probiotic. So that's tricky too. So you got to watch out and make sure it's a dairy-free probiotic.
So people that are sensitive or actually allergic to dairy, which is number one, or egg yolks, do they have symptoms, or some of them is it so subtle and symptom free that it's causing problems, but they don't necessarily know it?
Oh, very interesting. Absolutely. Especially weight gain, first of all, like you were just saying, that they are working out, but they aren't getting their benefit. That sparked right when you said that. And I was like, absolutely. When your body is inflamed, think about each and every little cell. It's trying to make energy. It's trying to use its CoQ10 and mitochondria and make it very efficient. And if it's already clogged up with inflammatory mediators and things floating around, it's not going to function very well. So thus, fatigue is a big one for sure. The inflammatory response is so widespread that it is, very significant reactions throughout the whole body.
We put fatigue on our intake forms, and the vast majority of the new patients I see are circling fatigue. And I think it's many, many variables that go into why they're feeling fatigue, but I bet a large part of that is their diet.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to tell you most of it. I teach a wellness and health promotion course as well. And so we spend most of our time talking about those 4 pillars of wellness, but diet being one of the most important. Yeah.
Great. I love it.
And the hardest.
So
the hardest to change.
That is true. When you get inflamed, Eric, like your cells, is it harder to get like hydration to your muscles?
Yeah, I mean, it disrupts everything, right? So, something that's really interesting to me, we talked a little bit about how inflammation changes the alignment, right, of collagen. And so it can cause a scar-like formation in the tissue. They're like micro scars. And those scars are very, very dense, okay? And we for sure know from the literature that when muscles are pliable, they readily absorb nutrients. They readily absorb water much, much easier. But when collagen and fascia, especially between layers of collagen, when it becomes scar-like, you can get these adhesions, which is driven by the inflammatory process. And when you get adhesions of 2 planes of fascia stuck together, the fascia can no longer slide and glide. When you take out a microscope and you look at the layers of fascia, the way that our body is designed to be able to move 3-dimensionally, we have to have these layers sliding and gliding past each other. So there's a layer of water in between these layers of fascia. But when the alignment is off, driven by inflammatory process, and you get adhesions and these planes of fascia become stuck together, water is not going in there. And what will happen is a lot of people say, I feel dehydrated and I'm drinking tons of water. I believe that they are drinking lots of water, but they're not absorbing the water. It's not how much water you drink, it's how much water you absorb. And so one really interesting aspect of the therapy that we provide is we apply pressure and shearing forces directly into these planes and force the separation allowing water to actually reabsorb between the layers of fascia. And that's one reason why people feel so much better, is we're just rehydrating the tissue. The tissue is so dehydrated because it's inflamed, because it's stuck together, because there's adhesions between these planes. So for sure, inflammation, food sensitivities, allergies drive this process of dehydration of the tissue, and that will make you feel stiff. And that can't be corrected by consuming more water. You actually have to force separation of the anatomy, and then water will go in.
All right. So here's a question that I kind of have for both of you. If I love my bread and I can't stop eating it, what are some things that I can do to help offset this inflammation that's going on?
I'll let Terri tackle that one. She's the food expert.
So I guess my question to you is, are you telling me that you still want to consume bread? And
well,
how
what kind of bread, right? That's another thing that we would say.
Bread?
That is very true. What kind of bread? So
what kind of bread? Are we talking about wheat bread? Are we talking about whole grain bread? Are we talking about white bread, right? So not all bread. It's like people talk about carbohydrates. Oh, carbohydrates are evil. Well, are we saying like unrefined, unprocessed? Or are we talking about highly refined, highly processed? Carbohydrates are not all the same. So I'm totally sorry, Terri, that I'm hijacking your answer right here, but it's just, we need to know what type of bread, right?
Let's say white bread.
Okay.
Oh.
So, but again, Bree, what are you asking? Are you asking me, how can I help you stop eating it?
No, what if I can stop eating it? Then what?
Always, this is the #1 problem, right? Compliant. And so, okay, so what can you do? There actually are digestive enzymes out there that, it is like Eric said, though. I will say that people say this all the time. You know, I went to Italy and I ate my wheat there and I ate pizza there and I didn't have the gas and bloating. And Dr. Gundry talks about this too, but that's because they process and they ferment their wheat and their product differently. So it's we fast track our bread here, and so thus we get more bloating and gas and so on, and thus it's harder to digest. So back to, what can you do if you really are never going to stop eating your wheat, and it shows you have a food sensitivity to it and you're still going to consume it? Then you do need a digestive enzyme. So you also need to heal your intestines. So it's very important that you are healing this lining. And again, that's a whole nother topic, but you're healing the intestines and doing things like probiotics and digestive enzymes to help calm that down. There's other products and so on too, but that calms it down to help your body tolerate that product better. So, and not everyone is sensitive to wheat, by the way. When you do the food sensitivity testing, and they say hallelujah, and they're, oh my goodness, thank goodness. So not everyone is sensitive to wheat. So it could be the tomatoes that you're eating, not on the pizza, not the wheat.
And
so
Terri, correct me if I'm wrong, gluten is a protein that's in wheat, barley, and rye. And if someone has a wheat allergy or a sensitivity, doesn't necessarily mean they have a gluten allergy, and vice versa, right? So there are other whole grains that people could eat theoretically if they wanted to stay away from gluten or stay away from wheat.
Correct. And again, they'll point that out. They'll look very specifically at amaranth and bran and barley and wheat and gluten. They separate those two out because they are different molecules. You're right. You are correct.
Yeah, I would, and Bree, my 2 cents on that question is, how refined is the carbohydrate? How refined is the bread? And what I'm really concerned about with the myofascial tissue is how much will it spike glucose? How much will your sugar actually be increased in the bloodstream? And so that's why I don't think sugar is the devil. I think sugar isolation without the fiber is really, really bad. So the fibrous parts of whole grains and in fruits and vegetables, it delays the release of sugar in the bloodstream, because when you have a high release of sugar in the bloodstream, you get a high release of insulin, and then your sugar drops down. So you go from hungry, starving to full, and it's back and forth all day because the peaks and the troughs of glucose. But one thing that's really interesting from a connective tissue perspective is that anytime glucose is high, it produces something called an advanced glycation end product, an AGE. AGEs are a really hot topic in connective tissue and aging science right now, because when sugar is high in the bloodstream, it will attach to proteins and it will render those proteins dysfunctional. Proteins, they do all of the biological work in the body. There are antibodies, there's enzymes, hemoglobin, there are so many different types of proteins. But when you look at protein science, they all have very specific structures. So when sugar attaches to the protein, it disrupts that structure of the protein, rendering it dysfunctional. Now, a lot of proteins in the body are very short-lived. They last for a few seconds, so it's not the end of the world. But collagen is a very long-lived protein. It sticks around for months and months and months. So it's much more likely to encounter sugar, especially a refined carbohydrate diet where sugar is very, very high. You get these advanced glycation end products, sugar attaching to the collagen, and it completely disrupts the function of the collagen and it hardens the tissue. I always tell patients, think of it like cement that's forming inside of the tissue. The worst patients I see, the ones that are the tightest, the most inflamed, the most dysfunctional, you feel their tissue, it is rock hard, and they have a long, long history of eating highly sugar foods throughout their entire life. And when you press on the tissue, you can just tell it's full of these advanced glycation end products, and that stuff is almost impossible to break up.
Even during physical examination, I note that as well, Eric, that correlation too. I see that too.
Yep.
Great. Okay, so we do have quite a few audience questions, so I will jump into that. The first one, you guys had talked about getting your micronutrients from other areas besides meat or dairy. So if I'm vegan, or even if I'm trying to become a vegetarian, and I know we talked a little bit about calcium, so say I don't want to take the pills, where do I look for these micronutrients? Is it possible to still be healthy, and still get that calcium intake, or that fish oil intake without eating meat?
The answer is yes, absolutely. I see many vegetarians and vegans, and it's all variety. It's really almost what Eric and I were talking at the very beginning. It's all variety. So you definitely, even though you're a vegetarian, are you really eating vegetables? That's what I see in my practice is they aren't. I would call them a carbitarian. And so a vegetarian means you do need to eat your vegetables, and you need to eat them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So again, your body still needs to consume them, and you also need protein. And plant-based protein is beautiful, many, many beautiful things. And so thus you will be getting your prebiotics, you're going to get probiotics, and you're going to get digestive enzyme from a variety of colorful fruits and vegetables. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think one thing to point out that's really important is fiber, right? It's a micronutrient that doesn't really get enough attention. And in some fields, it gets a lot of attention, but the way the microbiome ferment the fiber and produces anti-inflammatory mediators, the gut, a lot of people say it is where your immune system, or 80% of your immune system is housed in the gut. So if you have inflammation, make sure you're feeding the gut microbiome to produce anti-inflammatory mediators to get the inflammation down. That will heal your connective tissue. And you can only get that from fiber.
Yep, and that's a whole nother topic that we could talk about, microbiome, because critically important for connective tissue and the whole body, actually.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So it can be done. That's the
yeah. I mean, get the micronutrients from food. I think like Terri was saying, a really wide variety. Eat through the rainbow, all of the colors, right? Don't stick to just one food every single day. I was even reading an article from Gregor Reed. He's the chief science officer from a very well-known probiotics called Seed. I think he's written more scientific articles on the microbiome than anyone in the world. And they've done extensive testing. And they said the people that have the widest diversity of microbiome are the ones that eat the most amounts of fruits and vegetables, the widest variety of fruits and vegetables, because you're getting exposed to all of these different micronutrients and microbiome that populates the gut. And so I think that that's really, really important, is the diversity and the variety.
Most of our immune-mediated response is in the gut.
Yeah.
So it comes from the intestines and the microbiome. And again, tons of research on this. This is a very hot topic.
Great. So can you give me some, I guess, symptoms of what happens if I'm eating a lot of red meat? For like inflammation, does that cause any inflammation?
Well, I do see beef sensitivities quite a bit, actually. And so if you are eating beef and you have a food sensitivity and IgG response to it, then you're going to have the immune response. Now, there's also, just like Eric and I were talking about, the actual enzymes in the intestine. So some people actually have reduced enzymes in breaking down red meat. And so then they have some difficulty with that. Mediterranean diet, even the RDA recommends red meat. We still need our iron and so on. And again, variety if you do consume meat. But red meat would not be something you would consume every day. Most dietary guides would not recommend that.
Yeah, and some things that I've seen in the literature is that if you do eat meat, especially red meat, combine it with some fiber, because there's no fiber in the meat at all. And so consuming the fiber will help get the meat out a little bit quicker. But a lot of it really comes down to your own personal bio-individuality, right? There are plenty of people that are on a carnivore diet and they feel better than they've ever felt in their life. And of course, they're saying to every vegan and vegetarian, you're crazy, you should never be vegan, it's terrible, you should be a carnivore. So everyone's always arguing their own point. And I think it's important to note that everyone is different. Everyone has a different microbiome. Everyone has a different set of enzymes to digest and process food. We have different ancestors. We have different genetics. So find what works for you. Don't necessarily, do what works for someone else. You have to experiment a little bit. But also think about micronutrients are really important. Fiber is really important. Understand that cells are alive and they need live enzymes. They need live food, live micronutrients to really facilitate their processes.
Absolutely.
The more processed it is, the more it's causing damage, for sure. No matter what diet you're on, you want to stay as natural as possible.
And good oils, which we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
Another topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, your good oils like avocado, olive oil, your good oils are very important too with fiber. So again, it keeps that blood sugar steady, which is truly key. I did this lecture last night, keeping blood sugar steady. And so absolute key to, clearly it sounds like connective tissue and the scarring there and so on.
Okay, then we have another one here that says, where can I get tested to see if I have a food allergy or a sensitivity?
Well, food allergy, you can go to your primary care provider for sure. And so I would recommend maybe just researching it first, but food allergy, if you go in and ask your provider, you really do need to have symptoms. So if you understand healthcare and getting it paid for by insurance. But I would recommend maybe just doing your own research. And so Allergy is a really great lab that's been around for 30 years. You might want to just do some research about food sensitivities. And then also you need to understand the healthcare system. Remember, you have to have a disease process to do certain lab work. And so again, that's a whole nother complex topic. But do some research on it.
Great. So I know we are a little bit over, but for everyone watching that we didn't get to your questions, especially if you're on Facebook, you can log on to the Delos Therapy Facebook page and write your questions below this live video there, and we will definitely answer in the comments. Thank you, Terri. Thank you, Eric, for your time this evening, and we will definitely be back with other topics.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks, Eric.
Terri.